Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. My reading life has gotten a bit discombobulated lately, mainly because a couple of days ago I posted a video talking about World War II books, and I showed a couple of them, one of them being The Story of a Secret State by Jan Karski. And contrary to my best laid plans, all of the books that I intended to be reading I've sort of set aside, and I've been dipping back into this book and just rereading passages. I was reading this in the year 2002, or quite possibly rereading it in 2002, having read it before that. I don't know when the reread was, but in 2002 I wrote a book titled Fascist Heart, which was taking fascism as a theme, national fascism, and I probably decided I needed to bone up on fascism, and so I pulled out Karski and took a second look at it. That is what I would guess, and I have marked one of my favorite passages that I would like to read to you. At the time, the U.S. media was up in arms against... Hey! It's not going to do anything. Was up in arms against a subversive group known in the press as Al-Qaeda. It was not a moniker internal to the organization itself. It was something imposed upon the organization, which was what we would have called a terrorist organization. And I was very well aware that the Polish underground during the Nazi occupation would equally have been called a terrorist organization. And Karski, in his Story of a Secret State, gives pointers on how to survive within a fascist environment, yet to make strides against it, to take a stance of opposition. The book is a book very wise, thoroughly imbued with wisdom, I think. And Karski went on to have a happy life, I believe. I believe he wrote some histories of Europe, and I've never been able to find them. I don't think they have continued to be in print, whereas this book has been reprinted more recently. This is the original 1944 edition. Now, I'm going to read, let me see. I'm going to read from a chapter titled The Gardener, and the scenario here is he has been on some kind of a mission, and he has gotten captured by the Gestapo. He has been tortured, and his comrades eventually have sprung him from his captivity. So he has been freed, and there is a very good dialogue which ensues. So he, for the first few days, he is just in one place, lying extremely low until the search for him has died down. And then I will take his narrative from here. On the third day, when my confinement had become almost intolerable, the forester arrived with a young man who had been sent by the authorities of the underground. He appeared to be a typical young Polish officer, slim, alert, and with a careless, dashing manner. However, one could sense a determined and steadfast attitude beneath. In easy, sociable tones, as if he were issuing an invitation to a dinner, he notified me to prepare to leave the next day for a small estate in the mountains where I was to remain for a minimum of 4 months. You understand, he explained in crisp tones, the purpose of this order. Apart from the fact that the doctor of the hospital from which you escaped has deemed a total recuperation to be necessary, all your tracks must be completely covered from the Gestapo. You must promise, furthermore, not to engage in any activities which will lead you to any cell of the movement, unless they issue a specific order to that effect. Should you do so, it will be considered a breach of discipline. I suppose the finality of his tone rubbed me the wrong way. Somewhat peevishly, I flung back at him. You sound as if I am under suspicion, as if I've committed a wrong in escaping. Do you think that because I fell into the hands of the Gestapo, I've become rash or cowardly? Don't be a fool. I'm not a fool. I simply don't want to lie around in cold storage. I can still be useful. Of course you can, but not by becoming impatient and undisciplined. Do you call it impatience to realize that much work has to be done and that I am perfectly capable of doing my share? I could see the corners of his mouth tighten and his face become grim. Listen, he snapped. You know what no contact upward means. It's the most elementary rule of our organization. And then Karski goes into an explanation of the principle. And I remember at the time of the U.S. Pursuit of Al-Qaeda, the brouhaha, that had people a little bit more understanding about how these subversive or secret or underground organizations worked. It would have been made a lot easier, I think, and people would not have harbored unrealistic expectations. So let me just continue on with Karski's narrative. Listen, he snapped, you know what no contact upward means. It's the most elementary rule of our organization. The principle of no contact upward was a precautionary measure adopted in the formation of the underground. It was originally designed against the infiltration of spies and provocateurs into our cells. The presence of any suspect individual, anyone who might, by the remotest possibility, have been a spy or provocateur, presented us with a complicated problem. We could not eliminate all those who were touched by suspicion without causing a complete stoppage of all activity. However, to let them carry on their work without taking any precaution exposed the underground to the possibility of falling en masse into the hands of the Gestapo. No contact upward was a kind of compromise. The extent of the damage any suspected individual could inflict was limited, since he was denied any contact with his superior officers. However, he could still carry on some of his duties by issuing orders to those inferior in rank. Naturally, if suspicion proved well-founded, the suspect would be eliminated. Thus, the work of the underground could go forward effectively without the constant apprehension that would otherwise have developed. The rule was extended to include the cases of those who had been arrested. Indeed, even further precautions were taken. After each arrest, immediate changes in meeting places were put into effect. The personal papers of all members having had contact with the infected member were altered, and that member was ordered to remain in isolation for a certain period of time. As I reviewed to myself the implicit meanings in this important rule, I could not help but admit to myself that this handsome young liaison officer was perfectly justified in rebuking me severely. My feelings of sheepishness and chagrin must have become apparent in my bearing, for he immediately broke into an infectious grin and explained, "You know, you've got an underground version of measles. You were in the hands of the Gestapo, and as far as we are concerned, you have become tainted." He paused while we smiled understandingly at each other. Then he added slyly, "With the kind aid of a portion of the Gestapo, we managed your escape. So for a short time, you'll have to submit to a voluntary quarantine. This is a formality you understand, but a formality that permits no exceptions." There are so many pointers throughout this book for how to comport oneself in living under a fascist regime. And because of that, given the nature of the book I was writing, Fascist Heart, given the propensity or the apparent propensity towards fascism that I was observing around me, it seemed like a good idea to be writing about, and so I had to bone up on it. Now, I just realized I pulled out another book that I showed in my video about World War II books, and I realized these two books are probably among the greatest books in my life, and then that got me to thinking about the phrase great. A booktuber right now is posting a series of videos pertaining to the 100 greatest books in history, something like that. And I realize that a list like that has not been useful for me, but different books have had different levels of greatness in application to my own life. And these are among the greatest, for sure. There, you can see it better. As a writer of poetry, one cannot use words at face value. I think prosophiles can. And we write from a point where we understand that words, the whole tapestry of language is, by and large, in its increments, meaningless. So a word only becomes meaningful in its context. And a word such as great is an especially suspect word. It's a word that does not ultimately have a lot of use in most situations, except as a kind of a shorthand. Now, this booktuber is something of a mentor to a broad number of young novice readers, I believe. And so he is offering up this list of great books as a list for them to think about. I'm sure he himself would admit that it's not a hard and fast list, that it is dependent somewhat on his own experience, his own proclivities, and so forth. But I am thinking about the word greatness, and I can't use any other word to describe these as they pertain to my life. Some months back, YouTubers or booktubers were making videos about their essential books that were essential on their shelves, and I said I have no essential books, and I don't. That concept does not work for me, but I realize that I do have certain books which have been great in my life. Were I to compile a list of 100 books, these two would certainly be on that list, whereas something else, say the poetry of Elizabeth Bishop, would not. So pulling out this book, now this book has been reprinted under a different title, and it's had material added to it. It's just a straightforward work of history, unlike the memoir that is Karski's book. And I love this title. I prefer this title to what it has been changed to for marketing purposes, I think. This is a fairer title to the historical subject. And just when I pulled it out, I came across a paragraph. And here it is, just to give you a sense of this book as well. I'm not sure where I should start and stop. Well, I'll read the first couple. Sometime in 1937, Hans Scholl took a small but serious step into opposition, joining an underground youth group that still managed to operate despite Gestapo attempts at surveillance. They called themselves the DJI-2. I'm guessing. You can see it right there. I don't know what that means exactly. They called themselves the DJI-2 or DJ-1-2. I don't know. The German Youth of November. Oh, I see. The German Youth of November 1, 1929. So that explains it. The day their founder had arrived back in Germany from wanderings abroad and decided that another anti-Nazi youth group was needed before the Hitler takeover to counter the growing influence of the Hitler Youth. These young men, girls were not accepted as members, maintained a tight organization protecting their identities through the use of Germanic runes and nicknames. Although they did not take effective action against the Hitler Youth, their very existence was an act of defiance. So I think you can probably see what attracted me to both of these books, and I mainly wanted to share the little page and a half from The Story of a Secret State by Karski, but I may well find myself re-entering Shattering the German Night and getting further and further removed from the books that I have officially upon my docket. We shall see. If I find some other passages of note, and indeed they exist in this book practically on every page, I will perhaps let you know. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.